In the last episode, we witnessed the awesome resurrection power of God through the prophet Ezekiel and the surety of our deliverance. But before that, we were found standing in a valley, the dry bones rattling, bone drawn to its bone, sinew and flesh and skin, rising up over you until the body was whole. And all the while the camera was pointed back at you, so you could see the full effects of what has and is still being done to you. And through God's mercy and grace, just enough of us may have slipped through the cracks in the machinery and can claim to be nearly whole, but all of us, every last one of us, is still incomplete. And yet again, we left you waiting. We told you the breath was already on its way. The same four winds Enoch saw kept in the storehouses of God, the same wind that first stirred at the close of the episode before it. And we asked you to carry one question in your chest until tonight. Has the time arrived for the fullness of his breath? Wait for it, we said. Wait for it. But before we tell you when the breath arrives, we have to take you back to something we showed you a long time ago. Near the beginning of this series, in the second episode, we unrolled a map, the one Enoch wrote down before any of it existed. 10 weeks, from the first breath of creation to a new heaven at the end of time. We walked you through 6 of them: righteousness, the flood, the covenant spoken over Abraham, the law at Sinai, the temple on the hill, and the scattering that carried a people off into nations that did not know them. And then we stopped you at the 7th, the apostate generation, the week of the automated blueprint. And we told you something you may not have been ready to hear. You are here. The map says so, and the map has never been wrong. You have spent this entire series living inside that 7th week, watching it documented night after night until there was nothing left to prove. But a map is not drawn to strand you where you stand. It is drawn to show you what comes next. And tonight, for the first time, we walk past the 7th week to the 3 that Enoch saw after it, because the 7th was never the end of the map. It was only the last place you had arrived. So come now in this moment of profound anticipation and let us stand at the very edge of the 7th week's end and look into the unimaginable future of what Enoch saw waiting for us on the other side of it. The wait is finally over. It's the 8th week, and he called it the week of righteousness. Not righteousness as a feeling, nor self-righteousness as a delusion, but righteousness as a final verdict, the defining moment, the court that has been in session this whole time, and the righteous judge finally makes his ruling. Enoch wrote that in the 8th week a sword is given to the righteous, and that judgment is executed on the oppressors, and the ones who did the crushing are delivered into the hands of the ones they crushed. Think of it. Read that again, slowly. For 400 years the sword has been wielded with a singular focus and execution to destroy without mercy by the other side. They wrote the laws, they filled the ships, they engineered the blueprint of free wealth and greed. And Enoch says there is a week, already on the calendar, already drawn, where the sword changes hands. Are you comprehending this? Now hear that last line again, and do not let it pass over you like poetry. And sinners shall be delivered into the hands of the righteous. Sinners. Not to be confused with the sins we commit as an individual. Enoch is not talking about a man who cursed or a woman who lied. He is talking about a class of structural systems driven by behaviors manifested in greed and lust, engineered and administered by those that think that other bodies were created to be used by other bodies for their own personal gain and convenience, for free. You need to fully understand who that word, sinners, is naming, because in his book, the sinner is a very specific class. He names them himself: the kings, the mighty, the exalted, the ones who hold the earth. Are you getting the picture now? He wrote a woe against them that could have been written about the plantation itself. Listen to what he says. Woe to you who build your houses through the grievous toil of others, and all their building materials are the bricks and stones of sin. That is not a general condemnation of wrongdoing. That is the wealthy who got that way on stolen labor, indicted by name, 22 centuries before the first ship left the harbor. They will tell you slavery and its byproducts were not so bad. Look closely at how it benefited you, they say. You learned a trade. You learned discipline and perseverance through the whip. It was simply an apprenticeship that taught you skills you would not have had otherwise. Now, is that really a crime? They continuously whitewash and gaslight because they know a crime that weighs nothing needs no judgment. But God has the scales, and he weighed all of it. every single ounce. Because here's what Enoch says was happening the entire time. All your evil deeds are revealed in the heavens, and none of your deeds of oppression are covered and hidden. Every sin is every day recorded in heaven in the presence of the Most High. All your oppression wherewith ye oppress is written down every day, till the day of your judgment. Every day, not summarized, not estimated, but recorded, the way a clerk records an entry in an accounting ledger. Every auction, every lash, every child sold away from a mother who was made to watch, every name they erased, every language they took, every Bible they cut the Exodus out of, every one of the 400 years entered by hand in the presence of the Most High. They kept receipts on us, and all the while, he was keeping fully itemized receipts on them. So now hear the just verdict, and hear exactly who it is spoken to. And sinners shall be delivered into the hands of the righteous. Delivered. Sit with that word for a moment, because you already know what it feels like. It is one of our words. We were delivered out of Egypt. It had become a word used in an unsettling refrain against us. Delivered into bondage. Delivered to the labor trader, to the block, to the buyer, to the hold of a ship. Delivered into the fields as a body that belonged by law to another man. Handed over. That is the oldest sentence in our record, and there is not one of us it did not touch. A people handed over again and again and again. And now look at what the 8th week does with it. God takes that word, the one they wrote across 400 years of our collective lives, and he turns it around and lays it on them now. The ones who did the handing over are being handed over. The ones who kept the receipts have become the receipts themselves. Every house they built off our grandfathers' backs, every dollar that never made it into our hands, every hour of every one of those 400 years, entered daily in the presence of the Most High God. The ledger closes with the cost fully totaled, the account now settled, and it is settled out loud, with the shout of untold millions, filling the void of generations that had no voice, in front of the whole world as a public display unimagined in the history of humanity. Everyone will bear witness at once to what God has done for his people. Now, with an equal weight of importance, hear what is also not being said, because this is where a wounded people can be misled. The righteous are not handed a whip. We are not to debase ourselves and do to them what was done to us. Look at what Enoch says happens to the sword when dominion rests with us. It is wielded and then laid down. It is not used as perpetual punishment, but brought back into the house, sealed up before the presence of the Lord. It was never ours to keep. God struck first. God rendered the verdict, and after justice was served, the sword went back in its sheath. Think of it. We were never called to become them. Everything they did to us, they did because they had the power to do it and no one to answer to. That is exactly what we are not going to be. We were never called to become them. We were called to transcend by living on a higher plane. And when the sword is gone and the account is closed, look at what Enoch says our hands are to do next. They shall acquire houses through their righteousness, houses built on a foundation that can never be moved, the very thing that restores what was stolen, the generational, foundational wealth that our hands built and their families spent, coming home at last to the ones who built it, not seized, not looted, but acquired through righteousness, held and sustained by right doing, under the scrutiny of daylight, where nobody can take it away ever again. Where we go next will require some reading between the lines. As we all know, God does not need a house. He is transcendent. He is beyond the physical. And as such, he does not need a dwelling, as you and I do. Enoch does not end the 8th week with our houses. He ends it with one more building. Read the oldest layer and the word sharpens. It's a temple built for the great king in the greatness of its glory, for all the generations of eternity. And you have seen this temple before. Cast your mind back to the 5th week, when a house of glory and dominion was raised on the hill, and then to the 6th, when it was burned to the ground, and a people was scattered to the winds. The temple fell when we fell. It burned when we were carried off. So hear what the 8th week is really saying. The house of God that came down when we went down is going back up, and this time it stands forever. What once God allowed to be destroyed will never burn again. So, if he needs nothing, then what is this last building for? It is not for what he needs. It is in tribute for what he has done. Hear the difference. Because it is everything. We do not build to supply him. He cannot be supplied. We do not build to earn it. It is already done. We build because the sword was given and laid down, because the ledger closed, because the wealth came home, because a people who were told they were too far gone were carried all the way through. And a tribute is measured by what it costs the ones who give it. When a people pour out their time, their wealth, and their finest skill on something that returns them not $1 of profit, they are saying one thing with their hands: for what you have done, you are worthy of our very best, not our leftovers, not what we could spare, our best. And think of whose hands these are. The same hands that just received their houses, the same hands that built the wealth of nations for 400 years and were paid in lashes and broken promises. Those hands now choose, freely, for the first time in their history as truly free, what to build and who to build it for. That freedom is the tribute, not the stone, nor the brick. And it is one thing more, and this one is for the watching world. A temple is a landmark, a covenant marker driven into the earth in the open, where every eye can see it, declaring without a word being spoken, this people belongs to this God, and look at what he did for them. And remember exactly where it stands. On the ground where the auction block once stood, the very spot where other men once declared that we belonged to them. No more. I know some of you may still be struggling with this, so let me answer it by first asking a question. What is a temple even for? Is it a building we drive to on a Sunday? A destination? God does not live in a box built by hands. He fills the heavens. He is nearer to you than your own breath. So what is the point of the house? Here is the point. A temple was never a place people go. It is the place where God comes to dwell, the one spot on the earth where his presence had a physical address, where heaven touched the ground. Now remember the deepest wound of the 400 years, not the body, not even the wealth. It was the spirit, the image of God torn off of us, a people cut off from his presence, told we were too low for him to dwell near. That was the real theft, and the temple is the reversal of that exact wound. The presence they severed us from is moving back in. That is the one thing no settlement could ever pay. You can hand a people every dollar they are owed, and they will still lie in that valley without breath, until the one who was torn away comes home. The houses are what we are owed. The temple is who we get back. And watch where he is headed, because he is not moving backward. Trace it. First, God dwelt in a tent that traveled with a homeless people, then in a temple of stone on a hill. Then, think of it, in human flesh, when the Word became flesh and pitched his tent among us. And then, at last, in the least likely house of all, in us. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? The presence has been coming closer the whole time, tent to stone, to flesh, to the very inside of a people. So this 8th-week temple is not the end of the road. It is the last house before there is no more distance at all, before the day God dwells with his people with nothing and no one standing in between. That day has a name, and it is coming in the weeks Enoch has not shown you yet. But that is the 8th week, finished, the sword given, justice administered and laid down, the oppressor delivered, the ledger closed, the wealth come home, and on the ground where the auction block once stood, the house of God raised again, never to fall, his presence coming home to a people who were told they were too far gone. They were wrong. The 9th week is the big reveal. So here it is, the big reveal. The 8th week settled the account for a people, the sword given and then laid down, the oppressor delivered, the ledger closed, the wealth come home, the house of God raised again on the very ground where the auction block once stood. But all of that was the verdict rendered for us. The 9th week is that same verdict revealed to everyone. Enoch says it in a single breath. In the 9th week, the righteous judgment shall be revealed to the whole world. To the whole world. Not whispered in hushed tones. Not entered quietly in a ledger in heaven where only God could read the columns. Revealed, dragged out into the open, into the full light of day, in front of every nation and every tongue and every soul that ever drew breath, so that there is no one left standing on the face of the earth who can say they did not see it, what God did, and the people he did it for. And then watch what becomes of everything they built. Enoch says all the works of the godless shall vanish from all the earth. Hear the expanse in that. The 8th week judge the sinners themselves. The 9th week comes for their works as well. Everything the godless ever raised with their hands, their laws, and their money, gone, vanished from all the earth. Sit with how much that one word carries. Every system engineered to hold a people down, every fortune built on unpaid labor, every monument raised to a man who trafficked in flesh and bones, every doctrine that called it holy, every deed of ownership, every quiet machine still running in the background of your life this very night, all of it, vanishing from all the earth as though it had never been. Understand what that means. The works are not reformed. They are not renamed and quietly kept on. They vanish, and on the ground where they stood, you already know by now what rises. But Enoch does not stop at the works. There is a third line to the 9th week, and it is the heaviest one he has spoken yet. And the world shall be written down for destruction. The world, not just the sinners. We dealt with them in the 8th. Not only their works, those just vanished. The world itself, the whole order of things, the entire arrangement of the age we have been living inside of. Written down, the way a condemned building is marked, the way a debt is entered against a name that can no longer pay it. This is the same hand that recorded every act of oppression every day in the presence of the Most High. That hand now writes one final entry, and it is not against a person or a people. It is against the world as it is and how we know it. And do not let that word destruction land on you the way they would have it land. Because you have to ask, written down for destruction by whom and for what? This is not the world ending in ruin with nothing on the other side of it. It is the old world, the one built on the block and the ledger and the lie, being condemned to make room. A thing has to be pulled down before something new can stand where it stood. You have watched that pattern the whole way. The sword laid down before the houses go up, the works vanishing before the temple rises. This is that same motion, now at the scale of all creation. The world written down for destruction is not the last word. It is the second to last word, the clearing of the ground one final time. Because the very next thing Enoch shows you is the 10th week, and in the 10th week, the first heaven passes away and a new one appears. That is where we are going. So we come to it at last, the 10th week, the end of the map. Enoch has walked us the whole length of it. Righteousness, the flood, the covenant, the law, the temple, the scattering, the long apostate night, the sword, the reveal, the vanishing. 10 weeks, and we are standing at the gate of the last one. And the first thing he shows us here is a courtroom one final time, but not like any that came before it. He calls it the great eternal judgment. Hear all three of those words. Great, larger than the verdict for a people, larger than the reckoning on the works, larger than the world written down for destruction. Eternal, not a ruling that holds for a season, but one that never has to be handed down again. This is the judgment that closes every account that was ever opened, reaching even, Enoch says, into the realm of the angels turned demons themselves, the powers behind the powers, the ones who moved the whole machine from behind the veil. Nothing is left outside of it, nothing is left unanswered. And then, after the judgment, after every account is closed, Enoch sees the thing he has carried all this way to show you. And the first heaven shall depart and pass away, and a new heaven shall appear. Let it be quiet for a moment, because this is the destination. This is what the wind out of the storehouses was moving toward. This is what the breath in the valley was raising an army for. This is the far side of everything, the 400 years, the 4 dimensions of damage, the dry bones, the sword, the ledger, the vanishing, the old heaven, the whole broken order stretched over creation like a stained and blood-soaked sky, departs, passes away, and in its place, a new one appears. Do not soften what Enoch says here, because it is more than repair. He does not say the old heaven is cleaned, He does not say it is patched or reformed or renovated. He says it departs, and a new one appears. This is the promise we set down at the very beginning, spoken now at the scale of all creation. Not the condition restored, not the wealth returned, not even the temple raised, but a new heaven over a made new earth, where the thing that was broken is not fixed but replaced and unbreakable for all eternity. Everything up to this point gave a people back what was taken. This gives them a world that can never be taken, first, made last, and first again. And then Enoch writes the last thing on the map. After the 10th week, after the judgment, after the new heaven, he says there shall be many weeks without number forever, and all of them shall be in goodness and righteousness. Count what he just did. Every week until now had a number. The first, the second, the sixth, when we were scattered. The seventh, where we have been living this whole time. Each one measured, each one counted, because each one had an end coming. And here, at the 10th, the counting simply stops. Weeks without number. Time itself stops being a sentence to be served and becomes an inheritance without end. And every last one of those unnumbered weeks is goodness, and every one is righteousness, with nothing evil ever mixed back in. And Enoch closes with the words that close everything. Sin shall no more be mentioned, forever. Not sin defeated, not sin punished or fought back or held at bay. Sin no longer even mentioned, no longer named, no longer remembered, no longer a word anyone has need of. Think of all the words this series has had to carry. Auction, whip, ledger, scattering, sinner, greed, misery, hate, violence, suffering, crying, and death. Every one of them a word born from sin, words a covenant people should never have had to learn. And on the far side of the 10th week, not one of them is spoken again, because the thing they named is gone so completely that even its memory has no place left to live. That is where Enoch's map ends. Not in fire, not in vengeance, but in a deafening silence, where the reign and terror of sin is no more. So come back now from the time portal. Come back from the new heaven, back from the silence, back down from the whole length of the map, back to the 7th week, back to right now, because that is where you are still standing. When this episode began, we took you to a map you were shown a long time ago, and we stopped you at one spot on it and told you something you may not have been ready to hear. You are here, the 7th week, the apostate night, the last place you had arrived. And you may have heard that and felt what a people always feels standing in the 7th week, that this is simply how it is, that the machine is too big, that the night is too dark with no morning to come. But you have seen the rest of the map now. You have stood in the weeks that come after this one. You know now what you did not know an hour ago, that the 7th week was never the end of anything. It was the place right before the sword, right before the reveal, right before the new heaven and the silence where sin is never spoken again. So here where you actually are, you are not standing at the end, you are standing at the turn. The very next thing on the map after the ground you are on tonight is the 8th week, the verdict, the sword, the account settled, the great substance, and the house of God raised again. That is not far off history written for someone else. It was all written for you. It is the next line on a map that has never once been wrong. Not for 6 weeks of it, not for 7. Every week Enoch numbered arrived exactly as he said it would. God is not late, he's always on time, which means the one you are waiting on is not a hope. It is a scheduled certainty, a manifesting destiny where your name is already written into it. But before we let you go tonight, look one more time at the man who drew the map. Enoch was shown the entire span of time, 10 weeks from the first breath of creation to a new heaven and a silence without end. He saw the flood before it fell. He saw the covenant before Abraham was born. He saw our scattering and our sword and our new heaven 22 centuries before any of it arrived. He saw further than any man has ever been given to see. And there is one he never saw. Enoch drew the whole calendar of the covenant, every week of what God would do for a people. and nowhere on it, in any of the 10 weeks, did he see the face of the one who would come himself. Because the covenant and the coming are not the same event. Everything you have heard tonight, the sword, the ledger, the houses, the temple, the new heaven, is the covenant being kept to a people on the map in the weeks. But the rider on the white horse is not a week on Enoch's calendar. He is the one the calendar was always pointing to, and he arrives from outside of it, the thing even the man who saw everything could not see coming. Enoch gave you the map. He could not give you the rider. That is the one thing left for this series to show you, and it is where we go next.